Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last and final webinar on the Microsoft Power Platform series. So we're going to be taking you through some common data purposes and how to wrap up, our final product today. Just letting you all know that the Q&A is open. You can type in any questions throughout the presentation, and we can answer them at the end. I'll be fielding them for our presenter, Patrick. So just to get started, we're going to be doing some introductions about who we are, why you should be listening to us, and then we'll look back on what we've discussed the last few months, and then we'll go through kind of a demo walkthrough about the Power Platform and modern data warehouse architecture. And that will be a very immersive experience for you. And then we'll talk about next steps, what we have coming up that can help you with your projects. So quickly, who we are. MDS is an IT solutions and services company founded in 1994. We're headquartered in New York City with a few branch offices in Florida, Texas, and Puerto Rico. So we do have capabilities both here in the US and Latin America. We have about 70 engineering and consultants, and we have over 80 industry partners that kind of help us, run this business. So our four main practice areas are security and compliance, infrastructure, productivity and applications, and we do have a newer modern managed services offering. So we'll be kind of touching upon the productivity and applications data analytics side today. So we're not really constrained to one industry or a few industries. We're open to all of them. We do have capabilities to help in all of them, whether it be cloud services, security, and productivity. So we do have experts in a lot of these different industries. And so this is just a little overview of who our partners are. As you can see at the top, we are a partner of some of the major cloud partners: Cisco, Microsoft, Google, and AWS. But we have a plethora of different security distributors, SD-WAN services, product and applications. So we do have a very wide range of capabilities. And then these are some of our awards that we won in the last few years. As you see at the top, the last year, we won quite a few for Microsoft, both in LATAM and security and compliance practice area. So we're very proud of these. And then this is a Microsoft presentation. So we just wanted to show our Microsoft competencies. As you can see, we're a Gold Data Analytics partner, and we have quite a few other listed as well. All right, so I'm going to hand this over to Patrick Hall. He is going to be running the bulk of this presentation. And again, feel free to ask any questions that you might have throughout the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha, and good afternoon, everyone. And first, I want to thank you for joining us for our fourth and final installment of our Power Platform webinar series, Empowering Your Business with the Power Platform. And we just wanted to say we appreciate everyone's attendance over the last few months, and we really hope you've gained really valuable insights on how you can take whether it's Power BI or Power Apps, Power Automate, and Common Data Service, a number of the solutions underneath the Power Platform. And certainly what we want to do is make sure that we gave some insights and information and how you can leverage this with your existing Office 365 in Azure investment, and really whether or not you already have those investments or you're just beginning to start your journey in the cloud. We firmly hope that our webinar series provided you the technical direction you needed to begin your own Power Platform initiatives. So, as we mentioned, this series would really focus on bringing, in our case, our fictional oil and gas company that we had based out of the Caribbean called West Indies Oil and Gas, which we utilized to demonstrate a Power Apps model-driven app being driven from its initial creation to us leveraging really the most important asset that today's enterprises have, which is their data, right? And obviously, in a modern workplace, being able to leverage that data and utilize it throughout your organization is important. And so what we did was we began, as we mentioned, with creating our purchasing or inventory app using the Power Apps model-driven canvas. And from there, we were able to capture inventory data. And with that data, we really began to delve into ways that you can utilize that data and make it maybe a part of a larger inventory or enterprise solution. And part of that solution, which we really honed on over the last few webinar installments, was being able to incorporate that data within a modern data warehouse. And we're definitely going to touch on that a little bit more today. But certainly, we wanted to make sure, present that, when this started, it was really to be able to show that you can take your traditional, custom, really native applications that in the past have maybe been built for a specific business unit or really kind of dedicated to some core focus within your company. But because it's really more of a centered application, and maybe initially just a narrow view, it doesn't make it any less important, right? That data is still valuable and it could still be a part of your enterprise reporting structure. And so as we mentioned, within the Power Platform, there are a number of tools that make up that suite. Of course, we touched on Power BI, right? Which we know today is really one of the market leading data visualization tools. So of any of the solutions within the Power Platform that we're familiar with, we'd certainly say Power BI is it, right? The other solution, and one that I think we probably spent most of our time really kind of focusing on, and we really believe that's because Microsoft has positioned Power Apps to be one of the more central application development solutions going forward, particularly within the Office 365 space. And so within our demonstration application, we built a model-driven app, which essentially allows us to be able to create a form, but also being able to capture that data and save it within a repository built around the common data model. And so as you see there, we have identified the common data service. And really what it is a standardized way of capturing data within your organization and being able to utilize it throughout your Office 365 and Azure ecosystem. And so, some of the other things that are, just as important in our mind are Power Automate, which, as many of you know, was previously called Flow, but it's a way to be able to incorporate some automated business processes, maybe around Power Apps or Power BI. But it also can be leveraged in a number of the productivity apps that you have in your Office 365 investment. And certainly, one of the things that really is really mentioned, but Power Virtual Agent, in the past, it was really kind of recognized as the Microsoft Bot Framework, but it certainly is a way for you to be able to capture and interact with your customers in real time and be able to provide them an automated way of not just presenting information, but providing navigation throughout your systems on Office 365. And so as we kind of mentioned, the whole purpose of this was really to kind of show that the Power Platform enables everyone within your organization to really be able to utilize the custom functionality within Office 365. And so what we identified was that the Power Platform truly realizes Microsoft's vision of democratizing application development for the enterprise. Now, what does that mean, right? We've heard a lot about low to no code and really the ease of use of tools such as Power Apps and Power Automate, and really how it empowers the information worker to be able to get up and running in creating solutions that leverages your existing Office 365 investment. And so what we think when you kind of take a look at the Power Platform as a whole is that it not just empowers your development roles and development workforce, but it also empowers your business analysts, right? It gives them the tools to be able to kind of move forward and in realizing maybe a lot of the solutions that they envision, but may not be able to articulate because they're not just familiar enough with the architecture. It gives them the ability to kind of get up to speed and moving forward pretty quickly. And so what we also wanted to kind of present as you take a look at this architecture, we feel it highlights really just the broad and overall Power Platform, as well as its ability to support creating applications that provide both Microsoft native solution integration, but also integration with a number of third-party solutions. So, as you see here, we're showing the Adobe and the customer experience platform. We also see SAP, and we also see Dynamics, which of course we highlighted throughout this webinar series. But what we really want this to pretend is that when you begin working with the Power Platform, you not just have a solution that allows you to really create interfaces and get them up to speed quickly and maybe integrating it with OneDrive and SharePoint. We also want to be able to present that you can go beyond the collaboration and productivity space and maybe integrate it with other line of business systems within your organization. And as a part of this webinar series, what we demonstrated was that within our inventory application, we were able to capture that data, store that data, and then be able to export it into a storage system on Azure. And that system, of course, is the Azure Data Lake, as we show here. And so what we were able to do is we were able to take that common data model, the structure, the things that would help us standardize some of the nomenclature or some of the fields that a lot of our applications sometimes may become disparate depending on which department you're in, right? And so we know that maybe marketing would create a solution, and then maybe finance would create a solution. And a number of times where you would have organizations who do create custom solutions, right? You begin to have really kind of this siloed definition of the data. And so what the common data model allowed us to do was to be able to standardize that data, right? Be able to have the same verbiage, really have the same way that we define that data. And what we certainly wanted to present over the course of this webinar is how you can actually utilize that same structure that Microsoft utilizes today within Dynamics 365 for your own custom solutions. So as we really kind of take a look, with this particular slide here, and when we identified that with the low to no code approach, and really the availability of solutions across the Azure platform, all information workers can now begin to harness the full power of the Azure platform to be productive, right? Once we were able to export that data from Power Apps for our inventory application using the Common Data Service, we were able to store that data in the Azure Data Lake. And what we demonstrated with the Data Lake, as I mentioned, its ability to store that data using the Common Data Model in directories like shown in this diagram here, right? And as you can see below, there are a number of connectors. And again, I think that was certainly something that may not have been publicized and identified a lot, but there are, I believe, over 800 connectors that allows you to be able to integrate line of business system into your Power Platform solution. And so now, as we kind of take a look at the fact that the Power Platform, we know it's as Microsoft described, a low-code solution, and it allows both information workers, your power users, as well as traditional professionals. They can leverage the full power of the Azure platform. And so really one of the major things that we kind of talked about during the course of this webinar is the fact that Power BI, again, we mentioned this is a solution that perhaps most people are familiar with when they think of the Power Platform. it allows you to be able to not just take the data from your custom applications, but it also allows you to incorporate it and include it with some of the other traditional data sources that you may have, right? So as we kind of think of Power BI, we may think of on-premise data repositories like our SQL Server database that may store some key organizational business data. But now, as a part of that, we can now take and incorporate some of those same data sources that in the past may have just been considered, native solution, things that we didn't really need to incorporate. But as we become really more data driven and obviously taking into account that, in today's current climate, a lot of the workers are becoming more disparate, remote, and so is our infrastructure. So the need to kind of gain greater insights to be able to increase productivity overall has really gained importance, particularly over the last few months. And so what we are demonstrating with this particular architecture is the fact that, once we were able to export that data, we were able to store it within our Azure Data Lake here. And as we mentioned, the common data folder is really a directory that allows you to be able to take that data, and when we exported it from our Power Apps solution, it was the account information, it was the specific computers we bought, the pricing, and which particular representative within the company purchased those applications. And as we really kind of mentioned, that now can be a part of your larger enterprise inventory modeling and reporting. And really, that's data that in the past may have gone untapped. And so now, once we've taken that data, right, we've brought it into our common data model, we can now begin to leverage that data throughout the Azure platform. So as we're kind of showing here, right, within the Azure Data Factory, we can use that data and ingest it and begin to start taking a look at the data, begin to transform it. And what the Azure Data Factory gives you is the ability to be able to create what's called pipelines and really send that data throughout your data repository, your data ecosystem, and be able to leverage it elsewhere. One of the things that we really didn't highlight throughout this webinar series, but to us is certainly important as a part of your data ecosystem, is Azure Databricks. We know today that when we think of Databricks, it is one of those solutions where it's generally kind of been in the domain of your data scientist and your data engineer, right? They use it to kind of train their models and be able to kind of further glean insights of data that may not have been easily available. And with Azure Databricks, we are now able to take that data that we've exported from our common data model that originated from our Power App solution and begin to be able to look at it and maybe incorporate it in some of those larger solutions. And certainly the other thing that we mentioned quite a bit was the Azure SQL Data Warehouse, right? We know today that the Azure SQL Data Warehouse is really Microsoft's data warehouse solution that allows you to bring together enterprise data warehousing and big data analytics. Over the last few months, Microsoft is rebranded the solution, and it's now called Azure Synapse Analytics. And really what we believe is it gives you the freedom to query your data on your terms, right? It either provides serverless on-demand compute, or it provides provision resources at scale. And what we're going to show throughout this today's presentation, just kind of taking a look at the overall architecture, is that Azure Synapse is now able to provide us the ability to bring together these two worlds that we've really kind of highlighted throughout this webinar series, right? It does give you the ability to have a unified experience to not just ingest, prepare, and manage that data, but also to be able to aggregate it with the rest of the data that we've traditionally looked at within a data-driven enterprise. And just kind of bringing it back to where we really started, which was Power BI, right? Power BI ultimately is going to be the interface that allows us to be able to present, whether it's the data from our inventory application or it's the enterprise data as a whole, we want to make sure and highlight that Power BI is certainly going to be a key part of the Power Platform and being able to leverage that data throughout your organization. And so, as we mentioned, within this particular webinar series, we really highlighted our fictional company, West Indies Oil and Gas. And what we wanted to kind of show was, based on the architecture we saw previously, right, just how much did we leverage? And as a part of today's webinar, we really want to walk through all of the things that we've covered over this webinar and really highlight the individual solutions, and really at the end, kind of show where the direction that Microsoft is heading with its overall data ecosystem, and really highlight now that, as we kind of been mentioning throughout the webinar, the term democratization of data, really begin to kind of realize exactly what that means, right? In our mind, we would certainly say democratization of data means data no longer is just within the domain of your traditional data resources, right? It's no longer just for the data engineers, the report writers, the data scientists. We're saying that anyone within a modern workplace that needs to access or utilize or leverage data in any capacity, the solutions that you have on the Azure platform now available to you. And we think just by starting with our very small, right, our inventory application, which really just was taking some purchasing orders, we want to be able to show that now we can incorporate data no matter where it resides in your organization and really making it a part of your entire enterprise data story. So within our showcase application, just really kind of revisit it. We kind of started with the Power Platform, right? And in the Power Platform, as we mentioned, that data was in what's called the common data model, but behind the scenes, that is essentially a SQL database, right? But once we were able to get that data, we were able to export it, right? And then we were able to make it available in our Azure Data Lake, right? And we were able to kind of see the data, view what we exported from our inventory application. And then from there, we were able to either leverage it directly in Power BI, or we were able to kind of include that data within the rest of our data ecosystem. And as we mentioned, whether it's using Azure Databricks for data preparation, or Azure machine learning to be able to build and train AI models to really glean some further insights from that data. Or maybe we were looking to just take that data and route it somewhere else, right? We know that the Azure Data Factory gives us that ability. And so certainly, once we're able to capture that data, maybe include that data as a part of our overall enterprise data ecosystem, ultimately that data would go to someplace like a data warehouse, right? Someplace where you would now be able to query and utilize that data, from now and even for historical purposes. And so, as we're kind of taking a look at the modern data warehouse, really, as we kind of touched on before, right? Because we were able to take that data from the Power Platform using the Common Data Service and export it to the Azure Data Lake storage, it's now available to us. And a couple of webinars ago, I believe we really kind of delved into what the modern data warehouse is, right? And I think one of the questions we really asked as a part of that demonstration was, is the data warehouse still relevant today, right? And what we really kind of honed in on is that, yes, the data warehouse is relevant today. And the reason is because the data warehouse certainly isn't what it was when it really came onto the scene really over 30 years ago, right? The data warehouse has modernized over time, and really it's a distant relative of the original data warehouse architecture that really came on the scene in 1988, right? And so, just really kind of diving into how the world of data has changed. Well, first of all, businesses today are really data businesses, right? As we mentioned before, perhaps the most valuable asset to modern businesses is their data. And so whether it's, as we identified perhaps, I believe a few weeks ago, whether it's the corner store with their online accounting and stock keeping, and whether it's maybe the largest retailers out there on the internet, right? They all run on data. And so an enterprise that really doesn't manage or govern and secure its data, we believe won't survive as we go forward in this new economy. And so as a part of taking a look at your data, being able to include it as a part of your overall Azure Office 365 investment, the way that you really get to share that data unmistakably, particularly in a Microsoft ecosystem, is Power BI, right? And so when we kind of think of those technologies, things like big data or self-service BI, data science, they've somehow kind of superseded established technologies such as the data warehouse, right? And so what we want to demonstrate today, particularly as we kind of talk about the overall concept of the democratization of data, is that Microsoft Azure Synapse Analytics, it is a modern data warehouse with advanced architecture, security, manageability, and so it does make the data warehouse more relevant than it has been. And the reason being is because it is self-service. It allows you to be able to access the data no matter your role in the organization. Once you need to leverage the data, it's available to you. So now, as the regulations and kind of worldwide demand and greater governance begin to increase, we believe the Azure Synapse solution provides the ability to be able to get greater autonomy over your data. So now, as we kind of begin to take a look at some of the things we've covered over the last few webinar episodes, and certainly, as Sam mentioned, we're going to walk through the journey, right, of where we captured our data, exported it, and really kind of realized it. We're going to begin taking a look at some of the solutions along the way, right? And so, as we mentioned before, really at the heart of what we were doing once we took that data was we are able to include it within the Azure Data Lake. And then once it was in our data lake, right, whether it was the CSV file that we got from our Power Platform using the Common Data Service, or maybe it was just JSON data from maybe one of your app services that also existed on your Azure Data Lake, right? We were able to show that whether it's structured data or unstructured data, you're still able to access it, include it as a part of your overall data story. And so we mentioned before, right, one of the things that was really important of once you've captured that data and included it as a part, your current Azure Data Lake storage, being able to transform that data and being able to include that data within the rest of your organization, or maybe even ultimately ingest it into your data warehouse. What this particular diagram highlights is the fact that we're able to create a pipeline here, and you'll notice in the first activity there that's called copy data, we were able to ingest, and what it's called here is sales data, right? And include that data that's in the data folder. And what's being shown below is a notebook that where we would now be able to cleanse the data. And in other terms, that just means basically we're taking that data, we're transforming it, and we're looking for some anomalies or oddities that wouldn't really add to our overall data story, and really be able to modify it before it goes into our ultimate place, which is the data warehouse. And so you're noticing a couple of things that's being done here. But if you look at the very end, it's ultimately taking that data and putting it into our data warehouse. And so once we actually have that data in our data warehouse, right? For those of you who are familiar with SQL Server and really access the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, um, these tables and the way that we have this particular query here really is, very familiar. But I think the thing that should certainly jump out to you is the fact that we now have the ability to include not just the traditional data, like we said before, that's been on premise, right? That was always available to us. But now, as a part of our overall data story, we can also now query that data that may have originated from that little old app within finance, or maybe that access solution that you decided, you know what, we're going to migrate that to Power Platform because we want that insight, right? We want visibility. We want the ability to be able to query against that data with the rest of the enterprise data, right? Because we believe it's just that important, and we really want to have that level of insight into all of the data within our organization. And so what we really want to present, not just within our Power Platform solution, not just in their ability within Azure Data Lake to store structured or unstructured data, and certainly, not just the ability to visualize that data, right? We want to be able to show that to be able to glean business value with a very powerful analytics platform today, Azure Synapse lies at the center of the Microsoft modern data ecosystem, right? Because of its ability to bring all data professionals together so they can achieve more really and accelerate the time to insight, having a powerful analytics platform on Azure really allows you to bring that frictionless collaboration. As we mentioned, whether it's business analysts who are using Power BI, or the data pros who are using Azure Synapse, or the data scientists who are utilizing machine learning, we believe within this unique Azure ecosystem, you can provide insights to everyone across your organization. And using the Power Platform, we're able to not just look at some of the traditional places we got data, but now we're able to kind of look at some of those low to no code custom solutions that in the past we may not have had visibility to. And so, as I mentioned, what we want to do today, we're going to just kind of take a look and walk through the journey of that data that we've kind of spoken about for really the first part of this webinar installment, and really kind of highlight the solution areas, the architecture that really made up the overall infrastructure. And certainly, what we want to do is give everyone some time, certainly to be able to ask questions, or really, areas that you think may not have been touched on as much throughout this webinar series. Feel free to reach out to us and let us know. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to actually stop sharing it, and I'm going to switch over to my browser and really just begin to start demonstrating some of the specific areas within our specific West Indies oil and gas solution. Give me 1 second here and bring up my browser. Okay. And so right now, what we're taking a look at, and I think this should probably be familiar for a lot of you who joined us really for the first installment of our Power App series, is really what Microsoft calls the Maker Portal, right? This is essentially the Power Apps administration UI, and really kind of the place where you go to kind of manage your overall shared experience with Power Apps, right? And so as we kind of mentioned, there are a number of solutions that's available to you within Power Apps. And so if you were to able to kind of take a look here at the left-hand side, you see just really a host of items that's listed in that left-hand nav, right? But one of the things that's really going to be important to us, particularly for our solution that we demonstrated, right, are the apps. And so if we were to go in there, and so I actually already have that listed. And one second here. Let's see if we can bring that up. And if you guys remember, and as you kind of see here, it's saying 3 months ago, and that seems about right. Our West Indies oil and gas device ordering app, right? We went in, we created our model-driven solution, right? By coming in here, creating a new app, and you'll notice it does give you 3 specific solutions. But within this particular demo app, we created a model-driven app. And the reason that's important, and for those of you who don't remember, it was important because we wanted to be able to have that ability to store data on the back end, right? And so if we were to run this right now, so you just kind of click here, and we can see our drop-down menu, and it allows us to be able to edit our app, right? And so we click on that, and so what it does is allows us to be able to kind of edit our solution. It's like it's asking me to sign in. 1 second here. Of course, during a live presentation, it would happen. But one of the things we certainly wanted to be able to kind of show was the ability that we were able to kind of come in and utilize our solution. And again, as we mentioned before, this was our West Indies oil and gas device ordering app. And again, just to kind of give you guys an example, what it did was just kind of provided us the ability to come in here and really kind of order laptops, right? And be able to kind of check the solution. And eventually what it did was allow us to be able to save that. And then once we save that data, what happened was we would actually have that data stored as a part of our entities, right? And so, just to kind of go through that again, the entities really are a structure that really originated from Microsoft Dynamics 365 solution, right? As we mentioned before, it's based on the common data model. And really what the common data model is a reusable set of data definition and schemas that allows you to be able to make sure that whether it's your existing Microsoft investment, whether it's Dynamics, or maybe some of the other solutions within the Microsoft ecosystem that leverages the common data model, or as we're doing here in our particular webinar series, being able to store that data from a custom solution and essentially have that same standardized way that we define an account, or maybe we define an address, define an appointment. By being able to leverage that, we now know that no matter who's building a solution in our organization, whether it's, the guy that, is really a rebel in HR, right, that likes to build his own solution, or maybe it's the report writer in marketing, right? We're able to kind of generate solutions based on the same common data structure. And that's really valuable when we're talking about making our data a part of our overall enterprise data story. Okay. And so what we did is once we captured that data, right, we have, as you can see here within our entities tab, we have the ability to export the data, analyze it in Power BI. But what we did was we exported it to the data lake. And what that allowed us to do was to be able to utilize that data, as we showed in our demonstration, is to utilize that data throughout our architecture, right? And so when we exported it to data lake, what happened was Microsoft created a CSV file that included the data, right? It included the information that we had from our inventory app. So if I was actually able to go over to our data lake, you'll notice here that CSV file, right? And so for those of you that weren't a part of, I think, our second webinar series, where we really explored what the data lake is, it really is a storage structure on Azure that allows you to store both structured, and when we say structured, think of your traditional tabular formatted data, to unstructured data, right? It could be anything from an image to a video file to maybe saved emails, right? We know today that, as we mentioned with the traditional data warehouse, being able to analyze data that's just stored in a traditional relational database, it's really no longer sufficient, right? Modern enterprises need to be able to have insight to all data of all forms, of all sizes. And really the beauty of the data lake is it does allow you to be able to store vast amount of data of any format. And so now we can include that as a part of our data story. And that's why we believe the data lake is really so useful in an architecture such as this. And so as we mentioned before, we stored that data and we were able to kind of take a look and utilize it. And so what you can actually also do, once you have that data within your data lake, you can kind of view it, really kind of see what's in there and kind of take a look at it, or maybe edit it. And so as this data kind of comes up, what you'll essentially see is really kind of, the information that was really brought over. And ultimately what this is telling us is, here are some of the, notebooks and the laptops that were ordered within your, purchasing app, right? And so we can see here, the user identified as Patrick Hall. It's telling you, I ordered a ThinkPad and a Surface. And so really all the information that's available or was available in our device ordering app, we now have it in our container, in our data lake, and now we can access it. And as we mentioned before, you can preview it, you can come in and manipulate it and do what you need. But really the most valuable thing of this is because it's in Azure, it's in a repository that's accessible, we can take this data and we can report on it in Power BI. And so what we did was we connected from Power BI, and that same data that we were seeing before, right? We were able to see that data set. And again, just kind of taking a look at the data here, we can see, again, the same notebooks that we ordered. Again, just some of the price information. And it's really just this data set. It's kind of contained here. And, yeah, it does look like the information that we ordered a few months ago. But really, as we mentioned before, and really kind of the heart of bringing together data and being able to utilize data, what we really wanted to highlight is that we can now take this data and make it a part of our West Indies oil and gas overall reporting infrastructure. And so whether it's us being able to detect plant temperatures, really some of the things that are really kind of the money-making things of our fictional company, right? We can also make it a part of our overall enterprise reporting. And so as you see here, within that same interface, we have the ability to monitor things as big as our plant, and certainly some of the temperature of the devices within our fictional company. But like we said, also within that same workspace, we can take a look at that data. And so really kind of taking a look at really kind of the breadth and how powerful being able to start from the Power Platform, using Power Apps, leveraging a model-driven Canvas solution, and having that common data model behind us, we're now able to say, you know what? Because our data adhered to a standardized data structure, we can easily leverage our existing Azure Office 365 investment and begin to share and include that data within our overall story. And so once we kind of talked about being able to put it in the data lake, being able to review it, whether we're manipulating the data or maybe ingesting the data to route it elsewhere, maybe ultimately ending in our data warehouse, right? There are a number of solutions that's involved in it. And really one of the really kind of the themes that's been a part of our webinar is the fact that with low code and no code solutions, Power Platform really provided the ability for anyone, like we said before, whether it's a business analyst or whether it's a data scientist, to be able to access that data. But as we kind of take a look at some of the things like the data lake, or whether it's Power BI, or some of the other solutions, being able to have an approach where it seems a little bit more approachable, right? Or a little bit easily digestible, if you will, right? Having that self-service ability is crucial when we talk about the concept of democratization of data. And so what we believe Microsoft did with Azure Synapse, as we presented, is now you actually have the ability to be able to have all of those solutions that we mentioned previously within one singular interface, right? And so what we're looking at here right now is the Microsoft Azure Synapse Studio. And this is a solution that Microsoft unveiled. And as we mentioned, last year, I believe November at Ignite. And what's happened, and certainly internally here at MDS, we found that it's really enhanced collaboration around all of the data aspects in our organization. So as we mentioned before, right, we had the ability to kind of see that data, right? And so for instance, we know that that data was in our storage account. And so now I can go in there and I can actually begin to kind of take a look at some of those same data, right? Same things that we reviewed. And so for instance, whether we were talking about being able to leverage that CSV file, right? Like we saw within our data lake within that UI, right in this particular interface, I can come in and begin to take a look at some of that same data, right? We can come in and begin to not just utilize some of the same functionality that we had within that environment, but there are other things within here that we can also utilize, right? We can also take a look at, as we were showing within our Power BI, there were some natural gas data, right? Or maybe there were some additional items that maybe we wanted to kind of see, kind of merge with that data. We certainly mentioned before, as we were kind of going through some of these items, the ability to kind of see our device ordering app, right? And so right now in this particular view, kind of to see the same application, right? And so one of the really neat things about this is, you can actually be able to not just view that CSV data like we saw in that separate interface within the data lake, right? But now we can also come in that same view, right? The same interface, be able to take a look at our West Indies oil and gas, right? Be able to review some of the data that we just saw in our report. So being able to kind of pivot back and forth within the same interface, be able to utilize the same tools. In our mind, it really heightens overall collaboration. It does give you the ability to really begin to, and again, right in this view here, you'll see that I kind of have a number of solutions. So just kind of change the UI, and this is really how dynamic it is. I'm able to kind of see that same data that we looked at in Power BI. So now we know, as we mentioned before, the democratization of data, it really isn't a concept anymore. Within Azure Synapse Studios, the reason we're so excited about it is that it does give you the ability to work with that data. And so as you kind of see here, kind of filtering on device name and being able to take a look at that, maybe now you can grant access to purchasing, right? Where we know that application originated. And we can now be able to work with our data scientists and say, hey, we now have our purchasing data as a part of our overall enterprise data, architecture, and we can share it. But maybe there are other vendors, right, that you also want to share that data with. And so certainly by being able to not just have that data within Power BI, we can also have that data as a part of the Power BI embedded story. So for instance, as we're seeing right now here in our West Indies oil and gas Power Apps portal, we're able to see that same data within our Power Apps portal. And again, one of the solutions that we certainly didn't highlight a whole bunch during this webinar series, it's just one of really the many ways that Power Apps allows you to be able to create solutions, and not just create solutions, but be able to demonstrate some of the valuable data and really some of the underlying components that may be a part of your overall Office 365 and Azure investment. And so with that said, we are going to kind of bring it to close, but we certainly, want to be able to kind of be inclusive of any questions that you guys have. I know I ran a bit long. It's 12:54, but if there are any questions, really just a part of everything that we mentioned, as we, I think Sam may have alluded to in some of our previous webinars, we do have the information recorded, as well as some of the assets we shared with you as a part of our overall webinar series. Those things are certainly going to be available to you. And so what I'll do is I'll turn it back over to Sam. And if there are any questions, again, please let us know. But again, thank you guys for joining us. And certainly if there are any thoughts, feel free to reach out and share them with us.
Yes, so just to answer that one question that came in, you will be getting the recording of this, and some you'll be resent the document that was sent this morning and anything to help with your next steps. So yeah, if you have any questions, just feel free to please put it into the chat box. If you don't know what that is, it's the little question mark up at the top with, and you can bring it in to me and I'll read it out to Pat. So. We also have a podcast that was released, I believe, a few weeks ago, so it's still relevant. And this one it can be found on our website, and it will also be in the follow-up email. But this really talks about what's going on in quarantine, how to stay remote and secure, collaborative, efficient. So we talked a little bit about the tools that can help you and how MDS can assist in implementing them. So I'll be sending that around. And then, so yeah, we have, we're kind of moving on to Azure Synapse. It's a newer product coming out of Microsoft this summer. So we're going to be discussing what it is, how it can help, and why companies would want to utilize it. So that will be on the 28th of July. So in a few weeks, that'll be our first webinar on that. And I'll be sending that out, in a few days. So, and then of course you can just follow us on social media because you'll always get the updates on events and new products that are coming out. We thank you all for your time. If you have any questions that come up in the meantime, feel free to email me. Everyone should have my email, and I'll make sure to get it over to Pat. Thank you all for taking your time, and we hope to see you again virtually.